That's what I'm hoping.
I think so, yeah. Did we also want to have a conversation today around cross-cluster, that piece? Or do we want to save that for another time when it's just cluster leads?
Well, I think we need to know what's going on. I think partly I recognise that one of our issues as cluster leads is that we don't always, there's so much going on, not out of like desire, but we just don't communicate as much about what everyone else is doing. I think this is some opportunity to let everyone know what's going on. There's Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
And we have somebody else on the call, unless that's Hubert. We've got Hubert, Sarah, Stephanie on the line. Anybody else?
Lena.
Oh, hi, Lena. Welcome.
Hi there.
Hi.
I just
Sarah,
joined.
I'm sure we can hear you, Sarah.
How about now?
There we go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I'm happy to sort of. Or Alison, do you want to? I don't know. I think the point of this meeting was that we recognise that there's a few video-related projects going on across the clusters. Some of them are cross-cluster. Some of them are just projects within clusters. And then also, I can't remember who, but there was also a talk that other clusters might be interested in doing video projects in the future. So given the commonality in themes, let's connect, understand what everyone's doing, and then predominantly talk about evaluation, because the risk I see with all this is that if we all have it's okay to have different evaluation strategies to a degree, but if you have conflicting evaluation strategies, then as a whole we might look a little bit odd, all doing different things. So we should at least come from a same framework of evaluation, at least acknowledging the different approaches and working out what might be appropriate for them. And from our point of view, we don't really know much about evaluation, so we just want to learn what would be a good thing to do.
Okay.
Does that sound okay? So perhaps just quickly we could go around about any of the video projects that are going on, so that we all know what we're talking about. So perhaps I'll do what I was last. Sarah, do you want to talk about your project, the documentary project? What it is and what you're doing?
Sounds good. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So this particular documentary was in development before the KTIS implementation, like the cluster, became involved. It's being adapted from a book that was written for public audience called Let Them Eat Dirt by microbiologist Brett Finley and his postdoc Mary Claire Arrieta. And it's being produced by a team out of the US and hosted by Good Morning America's health and technology correspondent. And it's the hunt for missing microbes. So we know that there's good microbes, bad microbes out there. How do we maximize access to good microbes in early childhood to maximize health throughout the lifespan? So our particular study is evaluating how a documentary like this could meet the health information needs of parents of young children, with focus on those who are part of what we call the sandwich generation, or Generation Squeeze. Folks who are busy, time-strapped, parents of young children who are squeezed between work and perhaps caregiving responsibilities for parents as well as children, and what works for whom in what contexts. Another key thing about this documentary, other than its audience, is the key message or approach that's being targeted here. It isn't meant to enable audiences to take action or make decisions. That's not its primary goal. The primary goal is to raise awareness and information. So as a KT product, we're evaluating reach and spread through different metrics that the documentary team is already collecting, but we're also looking at how it works to inform parents about microbes. And we're not looking at behavior change, we're just looking at information here. And in conversations that we've had with other researchers, we know that our evaluation strategy may not fit for a KT product that may be looking to change behavior or help people make decisions. That's not its primary intention. Our methodology is using realist evaluation. It's primary qualitative. So it's a series of 2 rounds of interviews. Right now, we've just completed interview 13 out of a goal of 25 for this month. And really, we're getting to know what works for whom and what circumstances amongst parents who are looking up information about child health and how that intersects with the topic of microbes. Our next phase of interviews will take place after the documentary has been released, hopefully in February of 2019. And the goal then will be to understand if the documentary has achieved its intended aims with its intended audiences. So it'll be a combination of people who have watched the documentary and those who haven't. And as I said, the primary data is going to be the interviews. We're going to develop an understanding of what works for whom and what context for this KT intervention. And the secondary data that we're collecting are those metrics of reach and use that are going to be collected by the documentary team.
Great.
What a lovely summary, Sarah. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. You've been helping me practice this in a few different settings. What's the pitch? Does anybody have any questions about it?
Can you give us an example of reach and use, how those would be assessed?
Sure. I'm not sure what type of metrics they're looking at specifically, but what they're going to be looking at are page visits to the documentary website, views of the type of media that they're going to be sending out through their social marketing campaign, views during prime time on PBS. That's their primary way of disseminating the documentary. They're going to be hopefully breaking it down based on our recommendations into shorter clips based on different audience groups. So those who are pregnant, in the, that early phase after they've got their baby at home, and then in early childhood. So they'll have some clicks on YouTube and views on YouTube, and the way that it's shared and from different geographic sites around the world, just for example. It's not something that I'm in charge of, but what I can do is bring recommendations from the support unit and from what other teams are doing to the documentary team who are collecting that data so that we have some consistent metrics. And we're definitely at the development stage right now. They're not collecting that yet because we haven't gone live.
So is the documentary, is the actual documentary itself finished? Is it?
It's super close. So the rough cut was finished, I think, this week. They did their final filming in Mexico at the beginning of October. And we have a team meeting next week to talk through what's happening for next steps.
Okay.
It's going at a fast pace, trying to catch up and stay on our timeline with the evaluation.
Okay, Hubert, have you got any? You haven't got any projects, video projects right now, but are you thinking of some? Just give me opportunity. Have you got anything going on?
You may be on mute, Hubert.
Okay, maybe nothing from Hubert. Lena, have you got any video projects sort of like you're thinking about, or are you just sort of interested in the kind of being part of these cross-cluster projects?
We're not at the stage yet of having made decisions about that. So just here to listen and learn. Great.
And then, Stephanie, do you want to talk about the projects for health economics?
Sure. Okay, so the Health Economics and Simulation Modeling Cluster is looking to do a series of 3 different types of educational videos. The first is a documentary, so filmed in a regular documentary style with real people. The other two are whiteboard video of the style that most of us are familiar with animation, basically a hand drawing sketches and so on that go along with information. And then the third style being green screen videos, which basically will be a talking head style and a green screen background designed to quickly sort of cover topics in a shorter format. So the only one that we're already involved in developing is the documentary style. And I think most of us here were at the last meeting to talk about that. So this is a project that aims to basically sum up what the field of health economics is for a public audience, and also to describe some of the challenges that health economics sort of confronts, and to invite viewers to participate in health economics to maybe a greater extent. And our goals are really to just communicate core concepts of health economics, such as scarcity, opportunity cost, cost effectiveness, and so on, and to increase motivation to participate in health economics research. So we're working with a team of filmmakers at a firm called Salazar, and we've got 2 patient partners on board. And the stage that we're at right now is we've met basically with the filmmakers as well as the patient partners to develop a discussion guide, which is the filmmakers' term for a brief document that informs more specific script development. I'm not exactly sure how much more information to give, so I'll stop there and just leave it to questions. But in terms of the evaluation strategy, as far as I understand, what we're wanting to do is set up something that would allow us to compare the documentary style video to the whiteboard style video and the green screen style video to effectively communicate the same core concepts to the same public audience. But as far as I understand, that's to some extent open for discussion. So I will leave it there.
Yeah, I think just sort of the history of that project was for health economics and simulation modeling. When we start talking about having patient partners, we recognize that just having some way of the patient partners getting a flavor for what health economics simulation modeling is an important first step, which maybe differs for other clusters, maybe not. But this was seen as a way of creating a resource that could be used to help us engage patient partners and get them interested in health economics research. So it's a slightly different objective, but who knows where they might go. And I think we do have this comparative aspect of like which you could say which one is best, but then I think we know also that the audience is going to be different, and one might be better for a certain audience for different objectives. So I'm not sure we're really so focused on which one is best, but I think we are interested in having some resource available, which then might, with some evaluation, lead us to think through what might be useful in future phases. So I think that's the history there.
But it's knowledge primarily.
It is knowledge.
Maybe attitudes, but mostly knowledge.
It is mostly knowledge, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And Erin, do you want to talk about yours?
Yeah. So briefly, the project that we have percolating is the idea is that we've built on a platform which we've been developing through a teaching and learning enhancement fund, which is a UBC funding opportunity. And so this project was begun about a year ago to build an online platform called Tapestry. And Tapestry is a system that allows, the best analogy or metaphor is using video as a conversation. And when I use the term video, it can actually be any type of content. So rather than what typically happens with video, where we develop a video and it's fairly static and didactic and set, right? So it's like a set unit. Tapestry is a newer platform whereby users can add any type of content to the video itself. So you create a core video output, which could include the ones we've produced now could include animation, documents, audio, speaking head, or video clips. So you create your core video, but then it can become a conversation between, this was developed for teachers to work with students, where the students can contribute material themselves. So it's like a thread system. You have a core kind of basic thread, and then a learner or a user can add threads of knowledge onto it. And so for the PE cluster, our idea is to use this platform which has been developed and kind of jump off that existing resource, and to develop a number of modules. So you'll remember probably that the patient engagement cluster is very focused on supporting diverse voices in research. So we would develop, I think, one overarching module around patient engagement in diverse groups. And then underneath that would be 3 or 4 other threads, some of which might speak to projects that have actually already been completed through the support unit. So, for example, there's been one project on the ethics of patient engagement, and a couple of other projects that are actually at completion, almost ready for dissemination, and then a couple that we would generate from the ground up. And I think in terms of outcomes, what we'll be targeting will be knowledge and attitudes towards patient engagement with research. In our experience in evaluation, behavior is the hardest thing, obviously, to measure, and you really need qualitative methods to do that. So I'm still mulling on how big the scope of the evaluation for this will be, but it's tough to get at stuff like behavior change without using qualitative methods, and that's an extra big piece of work. So we might start small and see what we see first, and then maybe build on it after that.
Okay. And are there any other video projects you know about, Alison?
No. There are video projects being undertaken by the support unit, which may or may not fit in based on the conversation today, that could be leveraged. So, for example, there's a project on changing attitude for patient engagement, utilizing patient engagement for researchers. So it's a researcher audience that these series of videos are going to be designed for. And that's part of the physical activity method, the physical activity cluster at UBC. All of the UBC, SFU, and UBCO leads with their trainees who are developing, I think that's around 5 to 6 videos to, if you want to change attitude, the KTIS literature says it has to be respected role models displaying that. So it's got a different outcome and a different audience than what these other projects are.
Right. How did that come about?
It came about through the physical activity cluster approaching the support unit saying, is there any shared interest in doing this since it's relevant to patient-oriented research? Could we fund this 50-50 and share resources to do that? Wow. So that's coming through the TCD budget, Training Capacity Development budget. Okay. There's also interest in developing a few videos on examples of exemplar patient engagement in research. And there's already been a video that's already completed, I believe, on the island through the Island Regional Center about patient engagement in research, but I can't speak knowledgeably about its focus, its audience, or its evaluation.
Okay. So, just immediately given the sort of a range of projects, you see that they all have slightly different objectives, different audiences. So yeah, that sort of speaks to sort of like the evaluation may differ appropriately between them. But I don't know your musings, like your this is a document that Erin sent around on musings on overall evaluation approach. I think it's very helpful for our cluster, for example, we've been thinking about using sort of like your quantitative assessment A is what we had been thinking we would use, which is basically about sort of pre-post surveys and collecting things like satisfaction, quality, education, knowledge with free text as well. But I think it's interesting, I think just even as you say it, talking about diversity, and like, are we going to be measuring the appropriate demographic information? Are we going to even be targeting the appropriate diverse populations to be getting meaningful responses for what our objective is? It makes us question, what is our objective? We want, reality is we want patient partners for our project from diverse populations. So it's kind of obvious that you have to be measuring it. And
it hadn't occurred to me until I started to write that if we don't have a pop-up demographics question at the beginning, which could be optional, it depends on what consent we decide to use. But wouldn't it be interesting to look at our reach across the province? And of course, this will be much wider than provincial as well. It will, once it's out, it's out. So without having the basics on age and gender and geography at least, and stakeholder identification group, that would be a missed opportunity. But so then maybe there are some basic things we can standardize, right? If we're going to use demographic evaluation lens, some of the demographic questions, a couple of generic satisfaction, did it meet my expectations questions at the end.
The only thing I would steer away from perhaps is the satisfaction angle. Notorious in the literature of being pulled apart for whether you're actually able to measure satisfaction. It might be preferable to, it's just nuancing words, but rather perceptions, experiences, how appealing it was, but not satisfaction, because satisfaction implies that you know what complete satisfaction is, that you've had an experience where you're fully satisfied. And especially when you don't have a comparator, that's a real struggle in the KTE.
But I guess what I'm wondering, the opportunity here is that we come up with some consistent questions that we use across our projects, or that you can choose to use, so that we're not all asking quality in a different way. Or I think that's something where I think cross-cluster we could help each other out by maybe even splitting up. Can you find the best question to use for this topic and coming away, or if you know it, we just use what you recommend. Like some way of just sort of that part. That's just on the quantitative assessments part. But I'm also kind of keen to hear on sort of what Sarah's thinking in terms of her qualitative assessments, and is that something that we should be thinking about as well? Do we have the scope for that? I don't know.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that we're not just going down the route of things that we know and we're more comfortable with.
Yeah.
And just making obvious mistakes to begin with. So.
This is the second time I've heard this today from you, and
I've just made nothing but mistakes for the past 8
No, Can I chime in with the mistakes that we've made recently? Do a little bit of failure reporting. So we did some changes to our ethics. We made an amendment so that we were collecting better data on participant diversity and demographic characteristics, realizing that we weren't capturing the characteristics fully enough, and we're missing out certain things. So one key thing that we added in was how people learned about study. We weren't collecting that uniformly. We didn't know which of our participant recruitment methods were most effective. The other thing was around screening. We didn't realize that a partner on social media, one of our parent partners, was being really diligent in sharing with her circle, and we had over 100 responses from parents who are highly educated in the Vancouver area. And if we hadn't gone through a bit of a screening questionnaire before engaging in an interview, we could have just skewed our sample too much. So So that's been a key thing. And I can share both of those tools, the screening questionnaire and our demographic characteristics, with the other research groups. See if it might be useful or adaptable. We've also been taking our initial interview guide and probes and adapting it and building on it. So it's been an iterative process. And what we started out with 2 weeks ago is really been improved on since. And I think that's one of the key things about our qualitative approach is we've been quite adaptive and flexible to what we've been learning so far.
Great.
So the ethics question, if you're collecting demographics, you would need, I mean, all of these projects obviously have to go through research ethics review anyway.
Yeah.
So long as we have that incorporated as part of the project, then we're good, are we not?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So it's just about.
For the health economics project, we're starting from the assumption that this is definitely research. It will definitely go through the REB. So
yeah, you might consider giving people the option of doing pop-up surveys. That would be a typical thing. You can either force them to do it. They're a research participant and they're forced to do the pre and the post evaluation, or then it's a bit different from when you let it go live, and then typically at that point it'll be an optional. There's things that pop up. It's like, would you give us a minute of your time?
and then
So
you have to ask
naturalistic
different
evaluation.
questions. Then there will be a different set of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Well, I think because we're not
So stuck
thinking
in there,
about
yeah.
like it going live part. So I think we're at the development stage.
Yeah.
So our sample's going to be a little bit more. We're going to be recruiting a sample. Okay.
And then the scale that I shared, the user engagement scale, is only 9 items, I think, the short form. It's developed by Heather O'Brien at UBC. She's one of North America's leading engagement with online technology experts. She's phenomenal. And that can be adapted for looking at engagement for any online product. So it was originally tested in news sites, so looking at the quality of news sites, but you can change the wording of the questionnaire for this health economic video was engaging, captured my interest, and it's got really nice psychometric properties, and it's super short. So it would be one thing we might want to consider as a cross-cutting kind of, I find this engaging, interesting kind of.
Yeah.
So is it a good thing to lose yourself in this experience?
Yes.
That refers to that psychological construct by the name of the guy none of us can ever pronounce, like Csikszentmihalyi. Flow, right? That is looking for, this is one of the 4 factors that this scale gets at, one of which is flow or getting lost in an experience, which is a prime state for learning. When time goes by and you're so absorbed in something, you turn around and you lost 20 minutes. That's a really good environment for knowledge absorption. So that's why that question is there.
We used a scale for a project out of the States. I forget the full name of it. Patient education materials, both for visual, auditory, and written. And they were slightly different for each.
So I was thinking here, there's just a repository option here, or like. And one thing with these repositories is that you just bundle so many things into them, it becomes unuseful. But I think Sarah's got some material.
I think for questions for the
questions, as you bring it up, can we just sort of make sure that we create a document with them all in? Maybe could we add to Erin's document here so that we have these materials available to us now, and also because I think we're thinking future as well, what other clusters might be doing with this, so that we can.
I think it's wonderful because it would fit into the mandate of creating products which could be utilized in other settings and for other purposes, and it doesn't have to be stellar at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like at the beginning, just a brain dump.
Just speaking to being useful, when I was chatting with team at University of Alberta when designing the study, they were really excited about this work and that there were other methods clusters engaging in video for KT dissemination. And they were quite interested in the idea of knowing what works for different types of KT projects. So depending on the audience, the type of behavior change, whether it's knowledge or intentions, and also what evaluation approaches might work for those different audiences and key messages and outcomes. So maybe some sort of way to classify our different products to identify similarities and differences in the types of videos that are being created and evaluated.
Was that the group at KT Canada, Sarah? No.
Yeah, so Shana Scott presented at KT Canada. She does work on developing videos for pediatrics and emergency room care for children, and has done very well in getting her videos out there for the public. And in our interviews, a couple of participants have actually referenced those videos that they've created on different health topics, which I thought was great.
So they have patient partners involved with that, and they have these 3-minute whiteboard videos, and they found consistently that a lot of people stopped watching after 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Yeah.
And partly like, well, maybe their videos aren't very good, that they don't keep them, but they're saying that this is actually, that is your attention span. If you're not prepared, 1 minute, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
The shorter the better. And also having it be structured.
Like, that's a good one. Structured. So yeah, so
structured, so you know, like, this is the topic, this is who it's for, this is what you do. Really practical.
A series of 6 1-minute videos is better than 1 6-minute video.
Yeah.
So like, just learning like this that we had no idea about is helpful to think through.
Our community advisory group, when we showed them our first set of videos a few years ago, and they tore them apart, and they said you have to tell people in the first 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Quality of health and quality of life is possible in bipolar disorder. That's the first thing, and then you say it again at the end. Right. But right at the beginning, of course, we've built up to it through a narrative that I know we've lost people by then.
Yeah.
Healthcare decision fundings are hard, but they matter, you know?
Yeah.
Would it be helpful if I pulled together a table from this discussion that people could edit about the different projects, who's leading them, where they're based, who the audience is, what the format is, what we shared in the discussion, then we can use it to sort of track?
Yeah, and one thing I'd add to that is like potential timing. I mean, like, who's going to be first to get to this point?
Okay, time frames.
Won't be yours, will it? So, will it be Sarah? Are you likely to be doing?
Against my better judgment as a researcher, yes. We're going to be through this at the pace of when the documentary is launched. So,
yeah, you're under a forced.
It's not my timeline, but yeah, we're going to have to be doing a lot of our preliminary first round of synthesis and recommendations this month, so that the documentary team can have all of their marketing strategy ready for in the new year. That's a timeline that they're comfortable with. That's what they work with. It seems wild and crazy to me, but this is, engaged research.
Steph, I'm just wondering, is there anything in terms of we're only thinking about the documentary at the moment, but we need to sort of move on to our other videos, but just from the documentary point of view, is there anything there that we should be sort of sharing or thinking through?
Well, a thing in terms of thinking through, I think sooner than later, I'd like to have some clarity on to what extent are we pursuing a comparison of the 3 different video types, for communicating the same message, because one thing that I would suggest is just that the documentary one is going to be a little bit harder to flex the concepts and the way things are presented, because it's done in a more sort of, first of all, it's going to be longer than the 1.3 second or minutes that we potentially can do for the other formats. And there's just some other differences. So I would want to sort of look at the documentary as the sort of primary one, where we were going to fix like what concepts we're going to present, what terms we're going to use to describe them. And then if we are doing a comparison, then to look to the documentary style as the sort of model, and then redo them, the same messages in the other styles. That would be my own way of thinking about it. But if there's feedback on that front, I think that I'd like to have that sooner than later. And also just in terms of the evaluation, so for example, let's say we want to communicate the concept of opportunity cost. The concept itself is actually, I think, quite intuitive. It's easy to explain the concept. It's not really intuitive, the actual word itself, right? Like, it's actually easier to explain the concept of opportunity cost without saying opportunity cost. So my question would be, in developing the documentary, can we go ahead and feel at liberty to explain the concept without saying the jargon? Or is the jargon something that needs to be said because later in an evaluation setting, we're trying to ask the question, like, do you know what opportunity cost means?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think just my perspective from the health economics has been that at the end, when we talked about evaluation, the example I give is, in the future, when there's a newspaper story about a particular individual who's not being given access to this expensive drug, for example, then understanding the public's reaction to that, and even if the public can say, well, that's difficult because that money has to come from somewhere else in the healthcare system. Like that, as a sort of a simple sort of like knowledge question, for me is the guiding principle here, because we think right now, actually we've got a survey right now that shows that people don't think that. They assume that that money should just come from somewhere and don't think about where it comes from. So, whether that fundamental reaction, or even if it's a fake newspaper story that we create after people have been through our different videos and see how their reaction is, for one construct, would that enough for us to sort of be satisfied that we have made a change in people's knowledge to engage them in our topic?
Interesting, because that was just recently undertaken in regards to fake news. That in fake news is so our research team looked at, do you counter misinformation with fact, and how successful are you? So this team was able to show that actually you're far less successful countering misinformation with fact, and instead they went to creating a vaccine against misinformation by an online game to help people recognize when it's misinformation, and that they were more effective in helping people to recognize misinformation than trying to counter it. So related to your point, there could be an argument made for simply being able to have people recognize that there's a counter argument to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because one response might be like, why are the drugs so darn expensive? Which would be a very reasonable response as well, other than saying, we've got to drag the money from somewhere else in the system.
Yeah.
But that would be a positive. I would see that as a positive response as well.
Yeah. So I think there are more nuances to that, but I think the idea of thinking about who's losing out is a key.
Yeah.
That's just for our evaluation. That's where I'm thinking.
Well, the more I learn about your studies, the more I think that really what you're not first of all, you're breaking ground with this piece of video work that you're doing. It's not like there's been a whole ton of research like this before.
Yeah.
If you really care about the methods, and comparing each of those video types, you have to have exactly the same content and message. You have to randomize people to the 3 or 4 video arms beforehand, and you have to use the same pre and post evaluation method.
Yep.
Whereas I think what I'm hearing you say right now is really some naturalistic research that gives you some hints for next directions, with some free text qualitative kind of survey questions built in, so you can actually hear about lived experience responses to them, is what you need right now, not this controlled. So it's not ready for that type of sophistication of question. It's not what you need right now.
And it would restrict us in what we can do
Well,
and say with each one.
It would restrict us, and my thought all along was thinking about the 3 of them in that way is a non-starter. If anything, I thought the documentary was separate. And if we were going to do any comparative work, that could be same topic, same material for the whiteboard and green screen. But I think after this conversation, I'm coming down more to what you were saying about what we want to do is learn what we can for future evaluation. We're not quite ready to do the randomization, because it does restrict what you can then talk about.
But one thing that you could do, which I think would actually be really quite interesting, is just collect the demographics of the people who actually access. And I think even just like comparing that is going to tell you quite a lot. Because obviously a priori would be that the documentary viewers are going to be very, very different to the people looking at the other.
And experiential. Like, it's not comparative to say which did you prefer, but what did you find appealing or distracting or irritating about this particular format?
And that can be
compare it back to the demographics, right?
Because I think now looking back, it's quite naive to expect that we'd have a project where we would say, for this topic, the most appropriate way to convey this information is this. I mean, that's not going to be
You're giving yourself a hard time again. That's the third time today.
You wrote that, David.
That's not going to be our...
Come on, David.
Come on. I'm going. I'm going to...
Can I add to kind of something that was just brought up about the unique opportunity here? And there really hasn't been a lot of literature on the area of videos as KT products. And you, with the economics and simulation cluster, have an opportunity to do some of the process and development evaluation that I don't have the opportunity to do, because I'm evaluating a documentary product that's really coming into our hands ready-made. And so we can make some adjustments to the marketing strategy or creating clips, but you have the chance, especially with patient engagement at the development stage here, to answer some of those questions through the development of the tools around who is this for, what sort of type of media work for different people. And again, that brings in more of this qualitative or naturalistic approach where you're using different methods of engagement and user testing than you might use when you've got the finished product and doing more of a quantitative assessment of impact.
So do you mean sort of like evaluation where the talk back? What is your experience of this? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so it could be listening sessions, focus groups with prototypes. It could be taking a prototype and doing a group viewing with a group of patient partners. So depending on the stages, there's different methods that can be used for testing the usability, the feasibility of the content and the way it's delivered. But again, I mean, that's going into a different area of methods than you might be prepared to delve into. That's the kind of thing that I get excited about, though, is that type of methodology. So,
Sarah, can I jump in on, because I like what you're saying.
I know Steph and I had lunch, and I got super excited about this as well with her.
And some of what you're saying is coming out a little bit in the process that we've been through, even just up until this point, talking to patient partners and the filmmakers together about how to approach this topic in a 4-minute, 5-minute little short video, right? And the thing is that, Nick's message, basically like, let's not have a knee-jerk reaction when we hear about a certain thing not being funded, right? What comes out in the conversation is that, you can get there with a lot of different arguments, right? And some of the arguments that patient partners and filmmakers sort of are more inclined to agree with or they like better are arguments that we as a development team haven't necessarily zeroed in on, right? So ideas around, over focusing on health technologies has implications for the land and the water and climate change, for example. And, these are messages that they did not come out in our process of proposing the project, right? But I think what you're saying supports, at the very least, the idea that we should consider along the process making notes. Maybe the way that we were thinking about things is not the only way, and there is room to potentially modify how we present the message and co-create, as of course is the point of patient-oriented research in the first place, and actually putting that into the development, I guess, an evaluation of the development process itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's data that can be reported on that I think is going to be a really interesting contribution.
Okay.
There's been a discussion cross projects in KTIS specifically about this, that the learnings in the process of undertaking each of these projects are valuable within themselves.
Yeah. No, we haven't got there yet, but I think what Stephanie's hitting towards, that we're going to have a meeting with the documentary makers next week. I think it's going to be a bit of conflict. Maybe not, but in terms of because we obviously have our perspective on this, and it's hard for us to let go on that. And we're trying to just say, so long as people know this, you go away and do it, because we don't know the best way of doing documentaries. But there's still going to be some kind of conflict about what our documentary makers want, what our patient partners want, what we want. So it's going to be interesting. We're right in the thick of it right now.
Be a fly on the wall.
Yeah, I'd want to know, how do you reach some sort of consensus? That would be a great learning.
David's going to be in charge of that.
So I hadn't really made the connection, but Larry's work on
$1 million heads.
Yeah. Probably has some sort of like learnings from it. I mean, obviously, like that was done very much in the context of drugs for rare diseases.
Yeah.
But the issues that like cloud all of that is, fundamentally it's a price challenge. So yeah.
So we've seen those ones.
Yeah.
Shared those. Okay.
So next steps are our shared document.
Shared document.
Google or Word that we all add to. Alison's going to pull together a Alison table that keeps us all organized and aware of what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, only as a first draft, though, right? Like, make it what you want.
Not stellar, but another word of meeting.
But I guess just the last point, though, is, we call these as a cross-cluster project, and I guess it is like just knowing how to, we're engaging, we're doing hard work to engage the patient partners, the documentary makers. We're probably doing the least good job of engaging the other cluster leads. Yeah. But it's just knowing how to do this as a cross-cluster project well, and we don't want people to sort of, I think our strategy right now is to keep in communication with people and let the people know where we're at and what we're doing.
I think that's excellent.
But if there's any other ways that we should be doing that, and are we really doing this as a cross-cluster project? I don't know. Like, we don't hear anything back. That's fine. But I just want to make sure other people know are comfortable with that as well.
So I think the language is important. Like for me, the citizen science project is a cross-cluster project, singular, because it is a single project where people are coming in it from different angles and contributing something different. But fundamentally, what's being developed and what's being, the output of that will be something that comes as a result of input from 3 separate clusters.
Yeah.
Whereas these, I think, are cross-cluster projects, plural in a sense. Like you're each doing a project that is within a cluster.
Yeah.
But there's something that like is then cross-cluster in that's you're wanting to make sure that there's something that's common across clusters in the way you're taking your projects forward.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of a difference, and I think it's so from my perspective, it's making sure there's learning, so that you're not reinventing a wheel that already has been invented. I mean, that makes perfect sense. But also then, like, having this common evaluation frame seems like the way that you can really sort of glue these things together.
Reminds me of parallel play in small children. They are doing their own castles, but looking at each other's versus collectively making a castle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, when we have this meeting next week, I think about we're hoping we're going to make a sort of plan with our documentary, which is being informed by patient partners and documentary makers. Are we then sending out that plan to the other clusters for their input, or is it more just, which, if we're honest, we may not really want any more input at that stage because we've sort of engaged upon so far? Is that just for knowledge that this is where we're at? I guess it's just clarifying what we're doing. Is it that informational? And maybe the feedback would come when we recognise that other clusters could contribute to the evaluation, for example. That's when we're reaching out for help. Does that sound okay?
Sounds reasonable to me.
Can I make a suggestion? I wonder if this is an opportunity now, like we're at a different phase of development, and everybody had to focus on their own clusters, getting their projects launched. But now that there's opportunity for cross-learnings and engaging to various degrees, would it be helpful to have like that, we talked about the ECOP where the documents are kept so that people could see them if they want them? Do you know what I'm saying? If for individual projects, is that something we want to mull over? We don't have to decide today, but I mean, if you knew that if you wanted more information about somebody else's project, when you have spare time and a large bottle of wine, that you have access to that.
I've always viewed you as that access point. I go, Alison, where is this relevant? And then you tell me where to go. It's sort of me going into a database with a bottle of wine. I've got better things to do.
Yeah,
Drinking wine and going to databases.
We're guilty of that as well.
That's fine.
I'd rather have the knowledge the
float
KT
the
lead may say that because that's what you do best, right? You said the synergy. You need to talk to ABC.
Okay.
And so it's such a blessing to have that.
You're not going anywhere.
No.
So
no, it's fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think there still needs to be an email train just to sort of keep it informed. But there does need to be some place for us to keep this all together. I don't know if now is the time to talk ECOP or somewhere else, but I think yes, in concept we need somewhere to store this, or even us as a part of our project with keeping record of it as a document of reflection as we went through it.
That's part of that living lab
It's part
kind
of the
of thing.
method.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
That's why it is a methods project. We're pushed into a methods project. It is a method of us working out how on earth we're going to do this.
I mean, I certainly think that, like, given the development sort of phase, I think that's really helpful actually for Sarah to sort of make that clear distinction. I think, like, given the development phase, I think there's value in actually sharing, like, where you get to, say, for example, in your meeting this week. I mean, and people, like, you know, may not have the time to look at it, but, you know, it may be that just, like, a quick look could sort of say, oh, actually, there's something that I can contribute to this. So I think that, like, given that you're actually developing something, and there are other people with knowledge that may be helpful in that context, it's like trying to avoid reinventing wheels. I actually think that might be helpful, and it may end up like not being helpful because you think, like, well, that decision's been made. Well, that's fine. Like, you know, at least, like, you know,
You have
got
the prerogative.
That's the concern about the type of communication communication. If we're putting something out there and then somebody does take that time to look at it, get back to us and say, sorry, we moved on that last week.
Yeah. Depends how much you like the person, really.
Well, we're doing okay. We don't really like each other. So.
Okay. Conscious of 4 minutes. Is there anything anyone else online wants to sort of share or bring forward before we sort of wrap up?
Nothing from me.
Okay. Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Hubert. And thank you, Sarah and Steph, for joining us. So we'll perhaps send around a little sort of meeting action point. Is that okay?
Sounds good to me.
With the table.
Yeah.
Not a stellar one,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for their time.
Cheers.
And hope to see you all soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
See you later.
Bye. Right.
There's real awesome value in doing this.
So this is a really good conference call thing. If I only... It works really well, this thing, doesn't it?
This is right. It's that one. It's the mouse. It's so nice for some reason. Oh, Hubert's gone.
Only we had
But
this
did Hubert actually join us?
He did,
He did. Okay.
but I think he was listening because at this point there isn't.
There isn't anything.
Yeah.
But like,